Hey guys, welcome to the MC Anime Podcast. We cover anime, geek culture, Japanese aesthetics, and Asian studies. We are a multi-fandom podcast, and you can expect to hear topics in your favorite hobby or fandom activity potentially. You can find MC Anime on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, please check out mcanimepodcast.com, our website. Furthermore, stay tuned in for another episode.
MC Anime Podcast. Today we're back with another special guest, and Leslie's back with us. How's it going?
It's going, man. I think it's like my third or fourth time being on your show, and trust me, I still listen to it all the time. Glad to be back.
Yeah, Leslie's an avid fan and featured spokesperson on this podcast. Today, sometimes, I guess, topic about meteorology and weather explained. So we're going to go into the insights of weather, the study of meteorology, how it applies to weather and the climate kind of thing. You can just go on from there.
Yep.
And before we get into everything, tell the audience the background of weather and meteorology in your life.
Well, all right. I don't know if I said this before, but I originally am from Florida, and I live in the Northeast now, so I know a lot about weather, as the Northeast and way down south, the weather is totally different. You know, when living in Florida, the biggest thing I had to deal with the hurricanes, the rain, the tide coming in if you lived on the ocean. It's all deals with weather. It can be really windy, it can be really hot, and then the humidity will just make it even hotter. And then now living up in Northeast, I live in Maine, you know, it goes from, I think today it was like 78, and then during the winter it gets to below zero. So you deal with that big of change. The weather affects the body. I know a couple of days ago it was literally like 34 degrees in the morning when I started to go to work, and then by the time I got out of work it was like 78, and that big difference of temperature messes with my sinus really bad.
Yeah. So, but you know, my perspective about weather and meteorology, at one point I was actually thinking about being a meteorologist and being interested in the nuances of how weather affects us every day. I, did, weather science, environmental science, ecology. So the environment, nature has always been a huge impact of who I like, especially the weather, the clouds. So personally to me, having that, passion for something like the nature itself and how it can be peaceful, violent, in between, the wispy clouds in the sky to the very hard-hitting thunderstorm. I just like it as an overall perspective.
So you might have been a meteorologist. Could have been on the Weather Channel, right?
I was thinking about it when I was like middle school. That's kind of when I took weather science as an actual elective, and I actually loved the class. It was really easy, got to the stratosphere, the different type of cloud formations, look at the sky and say, oh, I see cirrus clouds today. That's going to be fair weather for now, but rain coming soon, kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I remember in middle school, I took a geologist class or whatever. I think that's the name.
Yeah.
And it was just really interesting learning about how diamonds and rocks or formations are all different, and how they can tell like the layer of like time by looking at like they can go back, billions and billions of years just by looking at the dirt and what.
Well, the three types of rocks is sedimentary and metamorphic and indigenous.
Yeah.
When you have one with heat, one that builds up with sediment, the one that actually forms under heat and pressure.
Yep.
To turn it from like either indigenous or sedimentary into a new type of rock like marble.
Yes.
So yeah, I take in way too many sciences. I remember way too much. So my sciences knowledge is just everywhere.
There's nothing wrong with that, man. Knowledge is power. As a kid of the 80s.
Cool. And one aspect is the weather. So let's get into today's episode about weather and meteorology. So what's interesting about weather is the fact that it affects us every single day.
Yeah, it really does.
So you see it or not, you have head colds, you have sinuses, you have the rain, you have the heat, the cold, all the seasons. But all of that is just surface level.
Yeah.
When you actually see the entire weather of the world, that's when it becomes very fascinating. Because there's different weather in different places based on geography, the climate, which is a period of weather for various amounts, like 100 years or so, which is totally different. El Nino, La Nina, all of that.
Yeah, and then there's also like the trajectory of the sun, the moon. You know, all these different factors affects the weather on Earth, so to speak. Like like living in Maine. During the summer, the sun's out basically from 4 in the morning till about 10:30 at night, But then during the winter time, it comes up at like 7 o'clock, and then by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's down. So I mean that affects things because the sun's not out heating up the surface of Earth. Everything's colder. But during the summer, it's out, everything's bright, it's making the grass grow. It's, the humidity's a little bit out. It's a little bit warmer, So, like you're saying, you have all these different factors of things that are happening on Earth. Like different, geographies, different places around the world have different weather patterns and climates, everything else.
And, the main components of weather that I'm actually going to specify are like the 6 components: the temperature, the atmospheric pressure, the wind, the humidity, precipitation, and the cloudiness. All of these are major factors in general weather in any given area.
Yeah, it's true.
So let's go with the easiest one: temperature. Temperature is very obvious how it affects the weather.
Yes.
Because the way we read temperature is in Celsius and Fahrenheit, which we use the different systems to use the temperature. But at the same time, the big thing with temperature is the warm air current and the cold air currents. There's like 16 different currents that can happen within a storm system that causes the weather that we see. That's very fascinating.
Okay. You're weather pattern, like you said. I guess you're gonna be the meteorologist here, and I'm just gonna throw in my 2 cents when I can. But yeah, also the humidity also affects the temperature as well.
It affects the dew point and the heat index.
Yes, you're right.
But specifically with temperature, the difference between warm air and cold air and how it affects temperature as a forefront?
I do not. I mean, I know where freezing temperature is, but I don't know like specifically what you're saying.
All right, so when you have warm air, specifically, warm air rises. A lot of times, cold air sinks. So a lot of times when you have a cold front come in, you get that cold spell. All the cold air are into the lower level of the troposphere. As a result, you get it stuck there for a couple of days until the front goes out wherever the air current came from to blow it in for the first place.
Okay. It's kind of like the old saying that like hot air, like heat rises and like cold air kind of like goes down.
Yes. When you ever see, when you open the freezer door, the cold air will literally immediately go to the floor downwards. And anytime you have warm air, like hot food, you always see like the steam coming up, rising up.
That is true. It's also like when you have fog, which is it kind of like rolls across the field, and when it's warm, things are going up. Like there's like a fire or smoke, everything rises. But like cold air, it kind of like just hovers there,
Yeah, and it does a hovering sensation closer to the ground in the troposphere. As a result, cold air in the relation to warm air has different type of fronts. And that actually impacts the type of weather you might have. Like definite thunderstorms are caused by either cold air coming in, warm air colliding, or warm air getting trapped and the cold air basically being around and the warm air above interacting in a way to cause the clouds to change or collect in its daily routine.
All right, makes sense.
So typically when you think of temperature, you either think of, oh, I should wear a coat, or should I wear shorts, or should I wear pants, kind of thing.
Yeah.
If I go for the heavy coat, then I do the fur coat or the windbreak. That typically a lot of people usually see temperature. And there's actually, the temperature, there's a lot more than meets the eye, because that's the basic principle behind weather, is the actual type of front, like a stationary front, cold front, warm front, etc., can actually happen as a result of the different air currents with the type of temperature in the air current itself.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about temperature. Let's talk about the pressure. Because air pressure in the atmosphere is actually a very vital role when it comes to weather. So
Yeah, is it like the effect of gravity on the planet?
It's the weight of the atmosphere overhead kind of thing.
Okay.
So it's a force. Typically, when you get to higher altitudes, you get to higher pressure, less air.
Yeah.
You ever think about
that?
It's really hard to breathe because it's a higher altitude.
I also figured that the atmosphere and like the air is thinner too, right?
And the heat is less thin.
I do know, like in the change of air pressure, especially when I'm flying, like your ears are popping. You might, have like more G forces on your like on your body or whatever, especially when you're going up. Because you're feeling the pressure like forced on you. I don't know if you fly a lot, but I have planes, and until we get about cruising altitude, you take off, it doesn't bother you, but you feel the impact on you. Your ears are popping, you feel like you're kind of being weighed down into the plane.
Yeah. And the thing with pressure, that changes in the actual shifts is what impacts the weather. Typically, we have a high pressure system and a low pressure system.
What
The high
different
pressure system typically is cool temperatures, clear skies.
Okay.
While when we get a low pressure, it's like warmer weather, storms, and rain.
So clouds too, right?
Well, specifically, the pressure system is what's implicated in the type of weather you might actually see.
Okay.
In a high pressure system, you typically going to have a cool temperature, clear skies. No precipitation is going to form. No heavy clouds going to get ready to have a thunderstorm. Or that's kind of when you have like cooler temperatures, like 60 degrees, 50 degrees, stuff like that.
All right. Good to know.
Well, a low pressure system, that's when you have like the heat comes in, the 80-degree weather, but the storms coming in, the rain getting heavier because it's basically making the clouds keep forming and then they drop kind of perspective.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting how pressure actually plays into the role of skiing. Typically, if the aspect pressure is much lower at higher altitudes, like 40% of the air pressure is at sea level. But as you get up above sea level, the pressure dissipates. So it's not as much on the troposphere where it bears down on us constantly.
All right. Well,
So
listening to your insight here, you know a lot about this stuff.
I don't know about weather.
Yeah, man, you sound smarter than most of the weather people that I know. I don't know. You sound more into it or whatever, not to be like, oh hey, the temperature's gonna be like this. You can literally go in there and explain how it's done or whatever. I don't know. You seem like you're smarter than some of the meteorologists. I'm saying that with air quotes because of you're not like Al Roker or whatever. Like you just okay, air quotes. Okay, I see. You want the air around the weather is feeling hot. Pun intended, yeah, pun intended. Nah, what I'm saying is like a lot about this or whatever, and you're explaining it, and it's just sometimes just meteorologists or people that do the weather, they just kind of like, oh, this is coming and this is why it's gonna happen, and you're like, well, yeah, because this is how it's supposed to be. I don't know, you just sound more in tune with actually how things are actually going on instead of just like telling the the temperature or whatever. And I don't know.
True, I mean, typically, the best example you see with pressure is a mountain. Typically, you go lower to the mountain, the valley is more cold air, more pressure down there. Then you pump up the mountain and drive along. Your ears pump, which is a sign of the pressure change.
Yep.
So that's probably the best example with actual, like, in real life pressure, becoming less. Because you don't realize when you're at a lower altitude, not the higher one, the lower you get, the more pressure it is around you. You just don't feel it because you're used to it. It's not gravity, it's the actual air pressure. Really happens.
Maybe it's kind of like when you, like divers and stuff, and they go into the ocean and they go down, the pressure as they go down is like being in the air, starts crushing you inward.
The atmosphere, yes, exactly. That also has to do with water being very heavy, so the pressure intensifies even below the water line the deeper you go. But that's more of a water pressure.
Yeah,
Pressure weighs down more than the atmosphere.
I mean, it still deals with weather because it's all part of the same system,
Water pressure actually tends to be, water's heavier than air. So, for 4 cubic centimeter, you get more water pushed down on you the further you go down. That's the science behind water pressure.
Okay.
It's a totally different, because water is just so heavy.
Yeah, I getting you off topic, sorry.
But it's a good tangent point. What people think about pressure. So think of like pressure, like in a tank. You had to pressurize the gas in order to get it moving or do it something you want to do. You do this in turbines all the time. There's pressurized gas that moves the turbine, and then that pressurized gas a lot of times gets heat and cold depending on what's going on.
Yeah. Okay.
So. But speaking of air, let's go to the obvious one that moves all around us: the wind, the movement of the air itself.
Okay. I know a lot about that.
When the differences between temperature and the pressure between nearby regions. This is how wind typically forms. So let's say you have a low pressure area, but with a high, low pressure with high temperature. That will create heavy wind because the difference is very drastic. A low pressure system is typically, warmer. And if you get into a cold environment nearby, that will cause a lot of the wind and stuff. Now, the reason why on a hot day, wind moves around more is because of the difference of how air moves. You ever feel like wind is like too much on some days?
Man, all the time is where I'm at. It's just I go out there and all of a sudden it's just super windy, and it's just like, where is this wind coming from? You're literally just standing still, It's fun. I guess it's because I live in the mountains. And like the hills, it just, sometimes there's no wind. All the time I'm like, these windstorms I've gotten, I've had to pick up like my trash cans on my neighbor that's across the street, and like a couple doors down, not right across the street. It's like hundreds of feet away, and I don't even know how it got there.
True. Winds tend to blow from areas of high pressure where it's colder to areas of low pressure where it's warmer. So that's typically how wind will operate in the behavior of weather specifically.
Okay.
It goes from the high pressure, which is cold, to warm. So basically, it flows from cold to warm. Doesn't really flow from warm to cold very well.
That's good to know. Now that I know that, I never really thought about how wind comes. I guess it just happens. But now that, I'm learning how you're explaining it to me, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So typically when you have, you have a cold front coming in, and then the next day you have warmer temperatures, typically that transition period is going to have more wind that day than, say, the week before when it was cold. Because of that change. The change in weather picks up in the wind and actually can make a really windy day.
Okay.
But the biggest influence that wind actually has in weather is the jet stream. This is like the very strong, fast winds in the upper atmosphere.
Okay.
And there's different dips in the jet stream that we have. Like, for example, when we have a dip, you have an anomaly in weather that doesn't usually happen in that area. And there's different jet streams. Like, for example, like the polar winds might come into Maine more than, say, the East Coast. And where the East Coast might be more affected by the Gulf Stream when it's coming up with the warm waters around there. And there's different, you have the polar winds, there's all kinds of winds that's labeled in the different jet streams, just depending on geographically what your jet stream does most of the time. Now, the speed of a jet stream, these are typically 80 to 100 miles per hour. But some people think 275 miles per hour. So you just have to be careful.
Sheesh.
These push the different weather systems around the globe. So jet stream is a huge impact in weather because a change in the jet stream means a change in the weather. And the cascading of the jet stream from the polar winds to like the Gulf Stream colliding, that's a storm front waiting to happen because of that interaction of, cold not mixing with warm, all that other stuff. Cold trapping warm or too much cold coming in, all that. There's a reason why Chicago, Illinois, nicknamed the Windy City.
Yeah, why is that?
It's named because it's on a large body of water where the Great Lakes has anomalies in weather all the time. The weather can change on a dime and just be windy have a huge amount of gust of wind coming in from nowhere because of the different, unique perspective in the Great Lakes. The weather in the Great Lakes can literally shift in hours to a thunderstorm without any secondation. It could be a clear sky and then be a thunderstorm automatic.
That's just a summer day in Florida.
Well, kind of in Florida, but specifically in the Great Lakes, it's such a large body of water that the Great Lakes itself actually acts as a anomaly in the weather in the area. Because the lake itself impacts the weather, but the warmer body and the colder body interacting with. Water typically doesn't want to warm up as fast, so it causes more of resistance. So any body of water, any large body of water around you, like the ocean, has a huge impact in weather because of that. A lot of times it's wind tunnels that come in. But yeah, that's wind in a nutshell. How about humidity? What do you feel about humidity?
I don't like it because it makes things hotter.
Well, you know what humidity is, right?
I do believe it has something to do with like water moisture in the air.
Yes, it does.
The
higher the water moisture index, the higher the humidity is. That's how much water vapor as a gas is present in the air around you, which has that greenhouse effect, which water vapor does, that actually heats up.
So what you're saying is the higher the humidity, the higher chances of rain is that day?
Like, the higher the chance of humidity means that in the coming days, rain could be coming, or it could be a lot of rain build up because of the high humidity.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was understand. I was right about that.
The benefit of a lot of humidity means that there's a lot of water moisture in the air. So that buildup is going to eventually lead to a storm, either a week or 3 weeks from now, whatever time it happens.
Dude, a couple weeks ago, man, it just like rained for like 3 days straight. And finally, my big ass yard is not a swamp.
That's a good thing, right?
Yeah, no, trying to deal with all that, man, just the mud and it was so flooded that a duck created his own pond. Okay,
a duck created its own pond. What do you mean a duck created its own pond?
All right, so. It was raining so hard and so long. I have, there used to be like a chicken coop there, so just like a pad that's really like low center in my yard. And when it rains, all the water and stuff kind of settles there and makes like a little pond. So a duck just flew there and he made it his own little pond for a day. It was like the craziest thing. He had his own little private pond. He swam around and had fun. And I was glad it wasn't a goose because gooses are mean.
You mean geese?
Geese, yeah. Well, it was one. The Canadian geese are not very nice.
And another thing with Canadian geese, the reason why they migrate south is because of the warmer temperatures. So it will have a big impact on how weather plays out. When they migrate, when they fly up north, that means, they're going to a food source that's, a warmer climate. And then when it comes winter time, they go to the south to get the warmer temperatures because they can't be in that area. All animals can actually survive in colder weather.
Well, some of the birds do survive. Like, you know, the seagulls, pigeons, and crows, you'll see them around all winter. But all the other types of birds, they're usually gone. So, like
that typically has to do with the behavior adaptation of the animal in the warmer climate or the colder climate.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, because all the other birds, those are all the type of birds you see. All the other birds, like you said, they're going south for the winter. So yeah. As soon as I don't see any geese, that means I know that the cold weather is coming. So I'll have to pay attention to that.
It's just more that, you know, waterfowl and fowl in general that are more susceptible to temperature differences have to migrate because of the behavioral adaptation that they have to have that warmer climate in order to survive. And sometimes it's also food too. Different food different periods of the year.
That's true, because like I know that crows, they're scavengers. Same thing with seagulls, and I think pigeons eat anything they can get their hands on. So their food source is different, say like a goose or a duck or some of these smaller birds or whatever that feed on, you know, seeds and grass and stuff like that. You know, if the grass is here, it's dead, it's not very lucky, and it's covered in snow, you know, the birds, they have nothing to eat or munch on, so they have to go south where it's not as bad.
True. Yeah. So yeah, overall, humidity is like, humidity usually expresses like relative humidity, which is the percentage of like the maximum of how water air can hold at a given temperature.
Mm-hmm.
So cool air holds less water, warm air holds more. And we have a heat index of relative humidity of like 100%.
Yeah.
So the closer it gets to 100%, the more concentrated, saturated water vapor is present in the air at that moment.
Yeah, it's kind of like when it says, oh, it's the temperature is only 80, but then the heat index says, yeah, it's gonna feel closer to 100, just because of the humidity hanging out there against the water and, you know, reflecting off the side. Trying to understand. Yeah, so I get that, and you know, it's awesome when we're talking about air stuff. Even though it might be 70, let's say 70 degrees inside a house, whatever, but you don't have any movement of like the air and it's stagnant. It feels like it's hot, even though it's only 70 degrees.
Basically, the more saturated the water is, the water vapor, the more likely that the air cannot hold that water vapor. That's why it gets released down the precipitation as it does.
And that's kind of like how AC units work. Is when it gets hot, you turn on the AC to bring it to a temperature. Mainly, it sucks the humidity out of the air to bring the temperature down.
Yes. And this is water vapor falls as precipitation. Clouds of precipitation occurs when air cools below its saturation point.
Mm-hmm.
This usually happens when you have warm, humid air cools as it rises, basically creating the precipitation around you for the clouds itself.
Yep.
And the most humid places on Earth is like the equator. Singapore is humid all year long. Any place in the Indian Ocean are heavily saturated because of the warm climate. It's so close to the equator, it's ridiculous. And the equator has a big determinant factor in weather in tropical areas because of the heat and the closeness of the sun, how the Earth's axis is pointed towards the sun.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, you know, the main factor in weather is precipitation. So, you know, the heavier the cloud, the more precipitation that will fall. And clouds actually exist in very different forms. You have like Columbus, which is very usual, big fluffy clouds. Cirrus cloud is like really wispy, very thin, not much there. Stratonimbus. You have all these different the big ones like the nebulas. The nimbus is like thunderclouds.
Okay.
The more you see gray, the more it's signs of storm. So if they're not white and they're all dark, that is a thunderstorm waiting to happen. And thunderstorm is the most common cyclone that we have. Not cyclone, but storm system. Because of the, it's very common with having precipitation, humidity, and all of that to play a factor into the actual precipitation of the rain.
Okay.
So, Have you ever looked at the clouds and see the different shapes?
Oh, always. I remember as a kid just looking at the clouds and to be like, hey, that one looks like an elephant. That one looks like a giraffe. That one looks like, so and so, or that one looks like a dog. It was fun looking at that kind of stuff.
True. That's why cloud watching is very neat, because people can identify what shape what it looks like to them, and someone can actually look at the same cloud and see something else. Because in shape, the clouds are being formed by the wind, the temperature, the amount of precipitation it has, and how much buildup it actually is building up. But also when you see different clouds, the different indication for the weather, because of the type of cloud you see. So for example, wispy clouds, like cirrus clouds, usually is a signal for mild weather. Fair weather for now, but rain coming later kind of thing. Like a blanket cover of nimbostratus is steady, long periods of precipitation. The nimbus or the thunderheads, that's the heavy downpours. So
I like that name, thunderhead.
Well, thunderhead is the big old cumulonimbus. That's the most common storm cloud out there. Those are your heavy bursts of rain that just seem when it beats on your house very hard. That's sometimes can be the cumulonimbus. Typically they're associated with thunderheads because thunder comes out of the cloud and the electrons and protons and stuff clashing with each other and causing heat. So I don't know. Clouds affect different sunlight reaching the Earth's surface. There's a reason why clouds are typically cooler than when clear, because clouds actually prevent more of the sun's radiation from reaching the Earth's surface. No, the opposite is that at nighttime is as like a blanket keeping the Earth warm. So without clouds, we wouldn't have the weather we have in any capacity. What do you feel about clouds?
Clouds? I like clouds. I don't like it when it's supposed to be like a nice day out and then it's just cloudy, and it's like you're not sure if the clouds they're blocking out the sun, if it's gonna rain or just gonna be cloudy all day. Like it kind of gets annoying because it's just like, all right, what are we doing here? You're just gonna have clouds bothering you. So it's a little annoying. So sometimes, like, you think it's gonna rain all day and you just wait and you don't make any plans, you don't do anything because you feel like once you go step outside, it's just gonna start downpouring. And then nothing happens, it's just cloudy all day. The sun's out, but the clouds are blocking it out. And you just waste the whole day and so clouds are fun, but I feel like, especially like when it's humid out, it rains and the temperature drops. But as soon as it gets done raining and the sun's back out, all that water and humidity just raises the heat up real quick. So I know in Florida, I never would wear like any of the heavy rain resistant like jackets or anything, because there'd be no reason to. As soon as it stops raining, temperature rises, everything's heat, and I'm just, I feel like the water I'm dripping in sweat. So I just always carry the.
True. Now that's a little bit of weather, how that's the main components that affect the weather. Now the interchangeability of how these factors affect each other is pretty simple. Temperature affects what type of system you have, the type of pressure indicates what the type of temperature will be. So for example, cold is, usually colder temperature, high pressure is cold, low pressure is warm, less pressure, moisture level, the humidity, and high pressure and low pressure is different, all of that stuff. But the history of actual weather as being forecasted is the actually meteorology part, which is the science of forecasting weather. Weather forecasting has been important for thousands of years. One big specific thing is farming or agriculture.
Okay.
The growing of crops. That has been a pretty mainstay in ancient civilizations, knowing the different seasons and knowing which type of crops actually grow in those type of seasons.
Yeah.
Actually using the weather as a tool to grow at different parts of the year to grow the best crop at that part.
I'm sure it's something that they developed over hundreds of years through trial and error,
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to see because, weather itself is very nuanced. Meteorology is a study of how weather interacts in history.
Yeah.
But meteorology is also the study of weather and climate of like long periods of time.
That's what meteorology means.
So they use the data they have from the forecasting to actually to show stimulated maps what the weather could actually do based on factors of the temperature, humidity, the dew point, all the air pressure, all of that, to actually give a golden toe signs like, okay, today's going to be sunny, here's why, kind of thing.
Okay.
And, throughout meteorology, the weather map indicates what's going on. So this is where you had the stormy cloud with the thunder. That means thunderstorm. The cloud with rain just means rainstorm. Partly cloudy is usually a cloud with the sun behind it. No clouds at all means just sunny all day. Do you like that type of stuff?
Yeah, I do. It's learning different patterns and how things happen and why thing is. I may not fully understand it, when I learn it, but like just the interest of just learning how that is pretty cool.
Yeah. And the spiral formation for a tornado is different than the spiral formation at a hurricane, right?
Oh yeah, a hurricane is just like a big ass thunderstorm, and tornadoes, I guess, they happen more frequently, but I don't necessarily know how tornadoes happen. I guess it's just like maybe a cold front and we saw a low front and a high front kind of colliding together very fast, and it creates the effect of a tornado just because it's two different types of weather pattern colliding really quick, and just it happens. You can probably explain it better than I could, but that's what I think it's how they happen, but I can also be wrong,
Well, typically cyclones typically are thicker lines because they are using more hotter weather situations where the moisture is relatively high.
Okay.
There's a reason why a hurricane sucking up the moisture from the Gulf Stream heading up the East Coast has a major impact, because of the fact that the warm air feeds it so much moisture, so it keeps going for hundreds of miles across coastline.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the pattern of a hurricane can pick up at a moment's notice, depending if warm air comes in to feed it more warm air. That's why warm air hitting a hurricane is actually devastating, because it picks up activity. It gains more water than what it had before, because it's constantly releasing the water. There's a storm surge, the heavy waves that come with the hurricane, and the high winds as well. But, cyclones are all over the place. We have monsoons, we have tornadoes, the hurricanes, different places. That's the reason why monsoon season hits Asia so hard, because of the warm climate.
It's like a hurricane, it just happens in Asia as a monsoon.
No, monsoons are typically tropical storms. They're like right under a tropical depression, which a lot of times tropical depressions become hurricanes and the cyclones.
Gotcha.
Typically, it's warmer water, and typically hurricanes in the Atlantic come from the west coast of Africa.
Okay.
And they kind of travel up, kind of thing.
Yeah, the hurricanes always start near Africa and then usually come up towards the Caribbean.
Yeah, and typically when it hits the Caribbean, that's typically where it will actually decide either to go to the Gulf or continue up. That's typically the destination point where it decides where to split off to.
Okay.
So, and with monsoon, this is a very heavy tropical storm. Typically, monsoon season in Asia is basically the equivalent of like the wet and dry cycles like you have in Africa.
Okay.
You have a dry season and you have a wet season. Typically, monsoon season is similar to like a wet season, but instead it's like heavy tropical storms causing a lot of damage, and actually could happen continuously. And that's usually during the warmer months, typically when the monsoons happen more frequently.
Yeah.
So, but, some place like the desert only has like two types of climate, but it only has two seasons, the dry spell and the wet season. That's it. That's the weather over there happen. With us, we typically have 4 seasons.
Yes.
Where equivalently, like, we have fall, or let's just say winter. We have winter, which is the sun going the opposite direction. So during that period of time, there's less sun out, so making it more cold, whereas the transition of getting to more sun is the springtime, was just in the middle, but enough where plants are growing and actually animals are back and not hibernating and all this other stuff. And then summer it picks up more heat, and then fall it comes back down in preparation for winter. So basically, in the scheme of things, weather is every day, and you can't get away from it. As simple as that. Anything else you want to add to weather and meteorology? Leslie, you there? But yeah, that's how weather is impacted through our daily lives. So as a result, you have different forms of weather and how it can actually lead to different things. Before we go, the instruments to measure the weather is the Doppler radar. So the Doppler radar signifies, the date of the weather map. A lot of times when you use the symbols, the fronts, lines down, triangles, all of that to simulate what type of flow it will be, the type of system, which weather is likely to occur in this front instead of this front, kind of thing. So it really comes down to that. So, as cyclones might be interesting in the seasons that go with it, different seasons having like 4 compared to 2, meteorology actually has a big impact in how weather can be perceived. Like, for example, on the weather map, when you see the weather map, you have all these symbols, and as a result, symbols mean different things with a different association with that symbol. As that being said, meteorology has grown significantly through the implications of the Doppler radar, which scans the different weather patterns on the horizon miles and miles in advance, with stations actually specifically measuring the weather inputs live to actually gather the data that meteorologists use to actually predict the weather. So what do you think of that implication?
Well, when you're talking about Doppler radars, like I said, when I am from Florida, there's a lot of them there. And I remember reading about how they have like 2 or 3 different like radar systems in the area, because say like one does this like circle or sending out a signal, and if there's clouds in the way or a building or whatever, they have 3 that kind of bring everything together. That way they're not missing anything, none's bouncing off of clouds or trees or buildings, and they can get the most accurate reading ever. So that's one thing about Doppler radar. Sometimes weather can, cause it not to be picked up on radar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and with also at these different weather stations that collect this data for the Doppler radar map, we also have the instruments that actually record weather in due time.
Yeah.
And the thing is, these instruments are all like being used at the same time. So like the barometer, the thermometer, the wind vane, the wind veil, the heat index humidifier, all that stuff is being used to gather the different information available at any given time. But the thing is very fascinating. What do you think of the instruments that meteorologists can actually use at their disposal for determining the weather?
I think with all the information they have, and they can get it basically when I said real time, like from like minute to minute, and just really with everything that they do and they're collecting it, you can kind of predict the weather of like, when I'm looking at see if it's gonna rain on a particular day, you can see it, fast forward it. Oh, is it gonna start raining at 2? Let's say it's gonna rain at 2 in the afternoon, and you're gonna see how long it can stay. It could go on for only an hour to like a couple hours, and it's kind of cool that they can predict the weather patterns like that, if it's gonna be heavy, if it's gonna be a light rain, or if it's not gonna rain. It's kind of cool with all these instruments. They can literally like predict what's gonna happen in the coming hours.
True. The 6 instruments that kind of like scientists use a lot at any weather, given weather station or a small weather station. One is the hydrometer. The hydrometer measures the humidity, the moisture in the air. So without that, they can't have the humidity, which is a major factor in determining the weather itself.
Yes.
The rain gauge measures how much rain has fallen. Basically, this determines They're just to add the rainfall, the buildup of rain. So if a lot of rain happened recently, the rain gauge can be used to say, okay, so if rain happened now, there's going to be a buildup time for rain to happen later,
Yes.
We already know how the thermometer works. The chemical reaction make it rise, go down depending on what the temperature is, and as a result, the reading is what the temperature actually represents at that time. So whether it's warm or cold, it spikes or sinks based on the same principle of warm air rises, cold air sinks. So any favorite thermometer you have?
Any favorite thermometer that I have?
Yeah, like any memory associated with any thermometer of any type.
I really can't say. I remember when I did Boy Scouts, we'd like to have a thermometer out when it would be connected with like when it rained, it would like capture like the rain to see how many inches of rain had fallen. I remember, kind of being this kind of infatuated with that because it would rain. I remember it rained really hard one night when we were camping, and it was like 3 or 4 inches of rainwater fell, because that's what was collected in the thermometer system we had. So I would say it wasn't the thermometer I was interested in. It was how much water, like inch-wise, fell and how much it caught. I thought that was kind of cool.
Oh, okay. With me, I think the thermometer that I think of like very early on is the mercury-based thermometers.
Oh.
The ones that have like the different sinking weights that have like a big glass feature. Because my grandmother had that particularly at our house a lot of the time. So it would rise and fall depending on the temperature range.
Well, now I'm thinking about like a thermometer. I wouldn't say it's like a classic thermometer, but
yeah,
ever since I got my own, I became a homeowner, and during the month I'll sit there and grill. I like kind of watching the temperature rise really quick. It's like, say it starts off at 70 or whatever, and then I turn my grill on and it jumps all the way to like 400 within like a few seconds, it just, or a few minutes, I shouldn't say seconds, but you're just watching the temperature rise fairly quickly. I kind of like that, because then now I feel like I'm awesome. They're like, yeah, I got my grill on, I'm gonna start making some meat, cooking and doing all this cool stuff, So I guess that's something that I look forward to, just making sure that my grill comes to temperature and I can clean it off, and then I can, grill what I'm preparing to grill. You know what I mean?
So temperature has a big impact on all kinds of stuff: chemical reactions, the weather, pressure, how much is actually being kept. The state of, ice, water, and liquids and gas kind of thing. The evaporation cycle is really key. So temperature has a big impact on how that all chimes out. So that's the thermometer. The next tool that a meteorologist would commonly use to measure the weather is the barometer. This is the tool to measure air pressure.
Now, how does that work, though? Do you know how that would work?
Well, okay, so the barometer is set on measuring the changes in the temperature itself. So it will actually, like, if the temperature drops, this means that clouds of precipitation, rain, or snow. Pressure goes up, usually clear or fair weather. Basically, the change in the force around it.
Okay.
So when you have a barometer, it forecasts weather in terms of the altitude. So basically, a barometer has a high reading, which is the high pressure, and then it's stable, indicates good weather.
Okay.
When you're in the midst of a high pressure system, that barometer is falling, indicates that a low pressure system is moving in, and you expect poor weather. So typically, a higher reading is the higher pressure, and a lower reading is the lower pressure.
All right.
So it uses liquid measures to predict the weather, but it changes. And then you have the different numbers. So the different numbers is basically the weight of the outlying air pressure down on the Earth. So it goes by the weight system. It has triggers in the weights that which if the pressure changes, it will indicate a different reading according to the weight around it and the instrument itself. So it's kind of interesting with barometer.
Yeah.
Because it's not really, it's like how you read. I guess it's like more sophisticated how instead of reading tire pressure in a way. like, all the PSI, because pressure typically gets put in PSI units for some reason. So it just goes to show you what actually it does in the terms of air pressure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the layers of Earth. The air has weight and presses against everything it touches as gravity pulls it down. Now we have different types, like mercury is the oldest. It's water is naturally light in weight, so a tall tube with large amount had different orbits to compensate for the heavy weight. Then you have like an anemometer barometer, which is like a chamber that expands and contracts depending on the pressure around it. Mechanical tools that measure how the chamber expands or the contracting aspect. So it's like basically how you have the different pressure around it being sensitive and being gauging it itself.
Okay.
So, but yeah. Then we go to the anemometer. The anemometer is the wind speed. So how fast the wind is coming from is very important in determining, what type of pressure it comes from as well. The anemometer also determines wind speed is typically the differences in the airstream. So that's where wind speed actually is a factor in determining the weather itself.
Gotcha.
You didn't think wind speed would be actually a measurement of weather, did you?
No, I did not. I did not. The first time I was hearing about it.
So when you think of wind speed, what do you think of?
When I think of wind speed, I'm thinking of either like flying like a plane, like a smaller plane, or either like a glider.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Can you want to deal with the wind speed and the current of the air and stuff like that. That's what I think of when you're thinking of wind speed. And it's also like when you're going into high winds, you're going against it. You'd much rather be dealing with like maybe 10 to 20 miles an hour instead of like a 50-mile-an-hour wind.
True.
It's called this turbulence.
Yeah. Basically, the first reason, if you know the wind speed and the direction, you know which the direction it's coming from and how fast it's moving. So if the rain's coming out of town like 80 miles per hour, which is, wind is usually in knots, so you can convert that over.
Yeah.
West. And the radar shows how the precipitation is moving to the east. Basically, when you have prediction, you can gauge the amount of time that weather event is going to happen from this location to the next location. So that's how wind speed is typically determined in weather gauging and predicting the weather. That's how you get the timely reports. 5 o'clock, the storm's going to roll in, kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, I'm following you.
So wind speed specifically is the amount of time it will take that system to travel to the next town or locality to prepare the next inhabitants of that area of the impending weather coming near them.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying say the wind speed is pushing a hurricane, and with the wind speed and how far away the hurricane is from your current location can kind of help predict how long it's going to take before it reaches your area, right?
Yeah, just like inertia. How fast is the object moving in a point of rest? Would it stop or would it continue in that, force? Because a hurricane is not going to stop unless it dies out itself.
Yes.
So if it's still going strong blazing or goes weak and then picks up again, then typically what will happen is that the wind speed determines the distance in which it needs to travel to the next location.
Yes. Okay. Now I'm getting it. Why it would be important.
Yeah. Wind speed and wind direction kind of go together a little bit, but wind speed is like time approximately it's coming from. Wind direction is actually measured by the weather vane. So typically, a weather vane you see is northwest, south, with all the different variations in between.
Yeah.
So weather vane is interesting because now where the wind coming from indicates the system that's coming with that wind. So if a strong wind's coming from the northeast, then you have like a northeasterly or a western wind. So these, a lot of the winds that we have, like northeast winds, trade winds, most of them are by location of which they're coming from. So the direction they're coming from, that's typically how they get the names, like the northeasterlies, the westerlies, all that stuff. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it is. It is.
We named most of the major winds by the direction they come from, because typically that direction has different phenomenon for the wind to be classified as.
Really?
That's why you had different types of jet streams. That's why you had different types of the trade winds coming up.
What is trade winds?
Trade winds is the force behind specific wind that deals with. Yeah, they're the easterlies.
Okay.
I just call them trade winds because they're easier to call than easterlies most of the time. It's east and west prevailing winds that flow into the Earth's equatorial region. Trade winds is another big impact, I think, north of the equator that affects all the different natural wind currents that we have.
Really? Huh. How come it doesn't affect like the south then?
It can. It's just depending if it's coming from that direction. It can flow into that direction.
Oh, okay. All right.
But the four types of winds that we have is planetary, the trade wind, which is the easterlies, the westerlies, periodic winds, and local winds. But the main winds that we have are the trade winds, westerlies, and the planetary. Local winds just happen naturally.
Okay. And what's periodic wind? What that's supposed to mean?
Periodic means it just comes up in the moment. It doesn't happen all the time.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, then self-explanatory then. I didn't know if there's more to it, you know?
It's just periodic. It's not as frequent, but it comes up. And the interesting thing about wind zones, the 5 major wind zones, fun fact, is the polar easterlies, the westerlies, the horse latitudes, the trade winds, and the doldrums. So those are the major wind zones that actually affect weather. So most of them are direction, but also the location where they come from. But, different types of winds also have a different type of force because different, say the polar easterlies, which affect, something like Maine or the Arctic Circle more, have a cold, dry wind. Little moisture, but cold coming in. So that also, the wind moves the temperature along. That's how you get the fronts and everything else. You see how everything now like cascades and ripples and like affects each other?
Yeah, so you're saying the different types of wind will create either a low or high pressure system.
Yes. A low pressure system, the higher pressure system has the temperature, which then also impacts the humidity based on the temperature, and then the humidity impacts the amount of precipitation, with the heat index.
Yes, right.
All that also forms the clouds of the precipitation building with the heat index.
Gotcha.
So in theory, you can predict the weather with a combination of data like barometer, the wind vane, and anemometer, thermometer, barometer, which is the humidity, and all put that together, you get like the different measurements to actually use the tools for the craft of meteorology. Now, meteorology is not a perfect science, but it's pretty accurate. It's the closest thing we got to predicting weather. So
yeah, it can't be like you can't predict everything, but you can do the best you can.
Yeah, there's always so much data in the history of data that can actually give you a phenomenon that still don't know the impact, like El Nino and La Nina. That's a weather phenomenon that changes what we know about weather as we know right now, because each time that comes up in front, it always has funky weather that happens with that effect.
Yeah,
La Nina.
What's up?
Have you ever heard of El Nino or La Nina?
Yeah, I've heard of El Nino. It's like usually like a shift in like a weather pattern.
Yeah,
that's what it's. And then La Nina is like the other shift of the weather pattern, if I'm remembering that correct.
Yeah, the El Nino is in the eastern Pacific, where the ocean surface temperatures get warm.
Okay.
So it basically affects the weather patterns that is not. It just throws everything off.
Yeah, of course. And that's what it is. It's like a weather pattern that throws it off, or different than normal, basically.
Yeah, El Nino's in the eastern part of the Pacific. La Nina happens in the equatorial east central Pacific.
Yeah.
But La Nina is more frequent than El Nino, which is like 3 to 4 or 5 years. But El Nino happens like 3 to 7 with that impact happen. But it's like a different weather phenomenon that has to be introduced because it changes how everything is typically done. So even if you look at the old, weather patterns of El Nino, La Nina, it's still going to be different than the other ones.
Yes.
So that's one implication of how weather can be very tricky to predict with all these different phenomena affecting how weather can be perceived. And that's why sometimes you get that strange weather that you just can't explain. It takes like a lot of study to actually understand what the heck happened. But yeah, as we wrap this episode up with meteorology and weather explained, what is one thing you want to say as a concluding thought?
About weather in general? I guess humidity is always the enemy of all the ladies dealing with their hair. So it's humid out. Make sure you have you're ready to fight the hair being all like dead or whatever. And if it's rainy, make sure you wear boots. That way your feet don't get wet.
Oh my God. Hey, we know where Leslie's interest lies. He's a photographer. He wants the women with all the messy hair so you can get the perfect embarrassing photo. And then
I know. I've had a few of those. I have quite a few of those from like behind the scenes of me testing out the settings on the camera, and just so many. Or if they fall.
Oh my God. He's getting all evil now on us.
Nah. They don't see the light of day.
That's so nice. It's down in you.
That sounds like something bad. Sounds like a Mexican cartel leader or something. What? It does. El Nino's coming.
Let's wrap this up. Weather, one simple thing about weather, you can't control the force of nature in which it is and how it can be. So know how that can impact the situation around you and actually be able to do something about it.
Basically, Mother Nature is going to do what Mother Nature does, and just be prepared.
Yep. All right, guys. This concludes Meteorology and Weather Explained. Thank you for being here. Thank you for Leslie being here again with us.
Yeah, it's always fun.
True. Oh yeah, as we wrap this up, bye guys. And Leslie, where can they find you again? Just in case they haven't.
You can find me on all social media platforms. The main ones: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Or either my name is Leslie Madewell, or you just look up Madewell Art Photography, and you'll be able to find me.
Exactly. He's going to capture the essence of your humidity style hair and blackmail you.
Yeah, exactly. Blackmail you by letting me get more photos.
It's just terrible.
I am terrible. I'm a horrible person.
El Nino says goodbye.
This concludes another episode of MC Anime Podcast. MC Anime Podcast is available on podcast directories like Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. We also have our website at mcanimepodcast.com. If you want to directly support us, then follow Patreon blog MC Anime. Finally, if you want services for hire, then we're available on Fiverr for audio and video production, graphic design, idea consulting, and blog and article writing.